On this week's episode of the Autohaus podcast,
a lot of it gets lost nowadays where people are very demanding online. They want an answer to something. They don't listen and they'll go and do something else anyway and learn the hard way. There are people that got a lot of knowledge in these cars that have been around for years and they largely offer that advice for free. There's only so many cars. They're not making any more of them. If you want the car to last, you've got to kind of stick together to an extent.
This is the Autohaus podcast. I have a guest from across the ocean and across time zones right now. Can you say your name and give yourself a short introduction?
Cool. My name's Chaydon Ford. I am in the UK. I've been here for the last 15 years, but from South Africa originally. I run the Corolla Brotherhood. We do organize events, social gatherings, clothing, stickers, anything that kind of, I guess, summarizes what it is to be a Corolla owner.
Let's hear more about the Corolla Brotherhood, because before I got on this podcast with you, I had to try to explain to one of the employees like what the Corolla Brotherhood was, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll get back to you. I'll find out right now."
Yeah, so it is literally what it sounds like. I've had Corollas for probably 11, 12 years now, and through owning them, I've kind of realized that you form quite a strong bond with the other owners, especially here in the UK. We've not got a huge amount of owners. I'd say active owners, we've probably got maybe 50 across the entire country, which in comparison to Australia, America, Ireland even is quite minimal. So it is, you have to stick together basically. We rely on each other for support and advice, parts, and it just kind of stemmed from that, where there wasn't any kind of driving force behind organizing gatherings specifically for Corollas and what became older other Toyotas as well. So I took it upon myself to start running the events. The actual Corolla Brotherhood was set up probably a year or two before, so about 2008, by a friend of mine who had a Corolla at the time, and he, through struggles with his car and other things, he lost interest in it. And I took over it in 2010, and from then I started organizing events, and it's just kind of grown from there. Every year it's got more and more popular. Like, there's more people buying the cars every year, and we get more people out to the events and kind of building the network of owners in the UK and linking up with owners all over the world. I mean, doing a podcast with you in America, I've been over to Japan and met loads of owners there. I've had owners from Australia come over. It's been really good for uniting people and meeting so many different people, all sharing this common interest.
I completely agree. Are you familiar with the guys from Progression D?
The name rings a bell, but not so much. You might have to refresh my memory.
Okay, so they run a YouTube channel and they're located on the East Coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll probably recognize, what cars have they got? I'll probably recognize them from the cars. That seems to be the way it goes with Corollas.
Okay.
Like, everyone in my phone book is listed by what kind of Corolla they've got,
oh,
which
no,
is pretty bad, I guess. But...
No, likewise. I have like AE86 Chris in my phone book.
Yeah.
So Eric Teddy used to have a coupe, and I guess he's famous because it's that video of the coupe going on its roof on his first drift day.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen that,
and
I think I recall that.
Yeah, and Hosen has that red 4-door IS300 drift car, and then also a white Corolla hatch with a 20 valve. Although that's not very descriptive because that's a lot of cars, right?
Yeah, I'll have to. Let me see if I can have a quick look while we're on here, just to refresh my memory. But is it Progression D?
Yes.
Cool. Let's have a look. Yeah, I've probably seen it, but like you said, there's so many. Man, there's a lot of different groups of people doing their own thing, and I've probably seen it, but at this moment my memory escapes me.
No worries.
Which is apologies.
No worries. No need to apologize. So yeah, they have traveled a lot out of the country in their Corolla adventures. So like Japan, Hong Kong, and they've said it similarly to um like the feelings you just said, how no matter where you are, if you're a Corolla guy, you connect pretty well even if there's a language barrier or whatever country you're in.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I just had a quick look online, and I recognize the cars now. I just didn't click.
Mm,
But what you said is true. I mean, before I went to I went out to Japan. I was staying. I was lucky enough to stay with a friend there, but I basically just spammed loads of Japanese Corolla owners' inboxes on Instagram saying, "Look, I'm coming over. If you're around, it'd be cool to meet some new people." And I was fortunate enough that one of the guys actually took me up on that offer and helped me out a lot with the language barrier and gave me some advice and took me to a few shops and stuff like that. And it made all the difference because you kind of, I would have missed out on a lot of opportunities otherwise.
Tell us about the Corolla Sisterhood. I noticed that popped up recently with
Yeah,
Amanda AE86.
yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't want to exclude anyone, being honest. There's a lot of female Corolla owners out there as well, and while it's always been called the Corolla Brotherhood because it is predominantly a male-dominated scene, I guess, I thought it'd be really good to include have something that the female Corolla owners would want to wear the clothing or have a sticker on their car or something like that, and it's proved to be quite popular, to be honest. It's had quite a lot of orders go out all over the world. Just looking at the hashtag for that on Instagram or social media, there's a lot of owners popping up that have used it now, and they're representing and quite proud to be part of it, which I think is pretty cool.
That brings up a good question. What do you guys refer to the AE86 chassis out there in the UK?
Just well, they came as a UK DM car, and from Toyota that was called the GT Coupe, and they were quite limited in numbers. They never did an SR5 equivalent to what you guys got, so they only came with the 4AG, and they were kind of marketed as a sporty coupe. So they're quite hard to come by now and quite expensive. A lot of them have gone over to Ireland because there's a strong following for them there. But generally, we just call them A86 or 86 now. That's pretty much the standard naming structure from here. Whether the UK spec or Japanese spec or whatever it may be.
So if you're with your friends or at a Corolla meet, you
Yeah,
guys just call them 86s?
yeah, pretty much, or Corollas. Just probably, yeah, Corolla or 86, I guess, are the two go-to names for them that we have here.
I imagine some people with the newer chassis come to your meets. What do you do about that? Or is there confusion with that in the UK?
It's there's again the GT86 hasn't sold in huge numbers here. They're quite expensive here, and for the equivalent money, you could get, I guess, like a Golf GTI or something, or BMW or something. So people tend to favor them. So we've not had many turn up to the meets, to be honest. I've always kind of marketed the meets or advertised me saying, look, like this is primarily for the older cars. It's anything pre kind of pre 98 is our cutoff for something that's kind of retro, classic, and Toyota. So there's so many clubs and so many events for the later cars that we kind of say, look, you're welcome to come and attend to view and take part to see all the old cars, but you have to respect that I do this for the old cars, not the newer cars. And generally people have been fine with it. They still appreciate the old cars. And if they get funny about it, we just quite honestly tell them that there's far more out there for them than there is for us. So they can't have everything, I guess.
That's interesting for me to hear that the GT86 is expensive out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially when they were planning to come out with it was marketed at a certain price point, and then through the exchange rate taking a bit of a dive, they went up in price. And I think, stand corrected, but I think now to buy one new, they're about £27,000, which converted, I'm guessing, is, geez, I don't even know now, probably maybe between $37,000 and $40,000 at a guess.
Oh my
I've,
God.
So what are they priced out there?
So total polar opposite. There's a joke out here that's really true is that you can pick up a used GT86 for far less than you can pick up a AE86 for out here.
That is true here too.
Hmm.
Soon, I mean, the used market, Corolla, the older Corollas have definitely overtaken them now. The earlier GTA sixes are hovering around £10,000 on eBay and places like that, and that's pretty much the starting point for an old Corolla now. They go from about maybe 9 grand if you're lucky, up to oh Christ, 15, 16, 17 grand, depending on the spec and the condition.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there's probably only about 50 of you guys. So,
Well, yeah, there's probably 50 active members.
oh,
So
okay.
if we do an event, you'll probably get 50 between 30, like the most recent event, I think we had about 40 something cars turn up. In total in the UK, we probably got, I'd guess, probably about 200 cars. But when you factor in, I guess the UK is like 1.5 times smaller than California, so it's quite a small space for total square miles. So there's not a huge amount of cars here in comparison to Ireland, where the last event I went to there 2 years ago, they had 100 oh Christ, was it? I think 125 cars turn up to the event,
Oh my God.
and that's still not all of them. I'd easily say there's thousands there compared to how many there are in the UK.
I read in some of the Speed on Hunters articles that it seems like importation laws are a little more lax in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, we are quite fortunate in that. I guess any car pre, I think it's 1993, they're a bit more relaxed on emissions, modifications. Like I speak to a lot of friends out in Australia with Corollas, and they're very, very, very hot on any modifications to the cars and getting defected, which is a whole ordeal. But here, you can pretty much have a race car on the road as long as it passes a basic safety check and it's insured and it's taxed. It's free reign near enough. I've been very fortunate. Like I've touched wood, I've never been pulled over in any of my Corollas, and obviously that's being mindful of where you drive and how you act while in your car. But for the most part, no one bats an eyelid as long as they're more concerned with the car passing its standard safety check and or annual safety check, as it were, and they're a bit more lax compared to what it sounds like it is for you guys. And again, we can import anything really. There's no real rules to how new or how old it has to be before we can import it.
Yeah, it's interesting the dynamic over there because it sounds like there's not a lot of Corollas over there to choose from as compared to maybe
Mm.
else, in other countries,
Yeah,
but it's really conducive to, being having like modifying cars as a hobby because
yeah,
the laws are far more lax.
yeah. There's a lot of I'd say Corollas are quite expensive here, and that puts a lot of people off. I think that for the money, people are going to, I guess, newer, faster cars with creature comforts and that. They're expensive cars to maintain, purely from a parts perspective, sourcing parts and that now. And while there are a lot of people buying them still, it's getting less and less common. I think that there's the diehards that they either get it or they don't, and you often see younger guys buying a Corolla now because they think they've watched all the media about it. They the hype around them and they get it, and a lot of the time they're quite disappointed by it and they end up selling it not long after or crashing it because they assume it's their limits are far higher than the cars, which is unfortunately not the case.
Where do you think this popularity or fascination with this particular chassis in the UK comes from?
I think a lot of it's rallying they and touring cars. So I don't know if you've watched any of the older British touring car videos, but obviously Chris Hodgetts was famous for racing a Corolla in the touring cars in the late 80s, and they rallied them as well, all throughout the UK and Europe, and especially Ireland. And I think a lot of the fascination here specifically maybe with the slightly older generations come from the motorsport heritage, where a lot of the younger guys are coming into it from the the hype around Initial D and just the drift scene, I guess. So yeah, motorsports are definitely a huge part of it. I mean, we're quite fortunate to have a lot of historic motorsport events here, and it's good to see there's a couple of Corollas out there, and there's more and more going out on the grids, which is awesome to see.
So Initial D is popular in the UK also. Did you say that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man.
There's a big following for it here. There's not that many Initial D kind of styled up cars, but there are a few. And while it's not my thing, my kind of thing, but I can respect the owner's choice and their desire to make it look like something that they've grown up with, or they've got a huge fascination with.
Yeah, it's just interesting to hear. It seems like no matter what out of country guest I get, it seems like there's always like Initial D has fans worldwide.
Oh yeah, yeah, no doubt. I don't get me wrong. I watched all of it. I've got a couple of the actual books and stuff like that, and I do enjoy it. But it wasn't that came long after I got into Corollas. It wasn't a real driving, like a pivotal reason for guessing one. So, and it's look, I can appreciate everyone's like cars and their build styles and everything. So if it means it gets them into a Corolla, awesome.
One other thing that I picked up from one of the Speed Hunters articles is that the UK's majority of, it sounds like from that article, majority of you guys use Japanese inspiration for how you guys build your cars or the styling, whereas in Ireland it sounds like it's a lot like rally car style is more popular.
Yeah, I'd say here it's pretty much solely driven by Japanese influence. There's the odd cars that are not, and especially if they're original UK cars, they'll gravitate more towards the rally style or the OEM keeping its standard style. Whereas in Ireland, there's just, don't get me wrong, there's loads of like really immaculately styled cars that take heavily from Japanese influences, but I'd say equally as many that go the other way and try and do the UK style, where it's small, like 13-inch wheels, spotlights on the front, CV antenna, and that sort of style. So that's a polar opposite, like equal split, I'd say. Whereas here it's far more heavily styled by the Japanese influence, because a lot of the guys that own cars here do take them drifting. We've lost a couple of the real good locations for it in the last year, unfortunately. But quite a few of my friends have Corollas as drift cars, and that's all they are to. And they're not even, they don't really ever see the road. They literally go from drift event to drift event, and that's it.
Unfortunately, that seems to be a common theme too, is that we're all losing racetracks. Can you talk about that? What's the track situation like for you guys?
I think, well, like I said, we've got loads of really good racetracks here, but a lot of them are really anti-drifting, because it's almost seen as the antisocial side of motorsport, where you're dropping onto dirt, you're leaving tire marks and noise. So a lot of that has resulted in very few tracks allowing drifting, or very specific isolated events. But otherwise, track days, I mean, there's no issue with that. As long as it passes the noise regulations, that's the biggest issue, is people moving next to a racetrack, as I'm sure it is in other places. Racetrack has been there for, say, 40, 50, 60 years. They move next door, they start complaining, and they get the racetrack shut down.
Man, there's so many parallels. So to give you an example, Laguna Seca is my home track.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
Yeah, and people who don't like drive around, like I've gotten lost there because it's like up in the mountains, and Laguna Seca's in like the pit of the mountains. So people who don't like drive around are like, I've gotten lost, and you'll see like the big multi-million-dollar homes, and you'll be like, okay, I get it why they would complain, but still, like you said, you moved in after there was a racetrack there.
I think you guys are fortunate to have large expanses of open space as well. So you may drive half an hour or an hour amongst nothing to get to a racetrack. Whereas here, it's very rare to have a racetrack that's very far from any built-up population. A lot of the racetracks here are converted airstrips from the second and First World War.
Wow, yeah, that's a good point too. Having what's it called? Just like the physical size of the land.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just, and I think motorsport is such a niche thing here. It seems big to us, but in comparison to the general population, such a small minority are into motorsport that it's always going to be a losing battle. And we're doing what we can, but ultimately we've got to be so careful with adhering to noise limits and, again, like antisocial behavior outside tracks where people leave and speed through the villages around it and stuff like that all contributes to closing them down, which is a real shame because people are basically they're causing it themselves. They've got no one to blame but themselves when they're acting like that.
Oh man, that you bring up a really good point for everyone listening to the podcast is being responsible, not even at the track, but when you enter and leave the track, you need to be responsible on your way home too. That's a really big deal.
That's it. I mean, there's an issue with it everywhere, I guess. Like we're fortunate enough. The last event we held at a really, really awesome location, kind of in the central UK, called Caffeine and Machine, which is like a petrol head kind of bar / pub gathering where it's built for motoring enthusiasts. And the slogan they have as you exit going out onto the road with 3 boards on the other side is "Don't be a dick." And that is literally it. It's basically just, look, they've worked really hard to build that place up and establish it there, and it can be taken away so quickly by someone who wants to peel out or bash the limiter on the way out. And especially organizing events, I'm the focal point. If something goes wrong at the event, it's my fault. And so I'm always really nervous of how people act, but generally Corolla owners have been really respectful, and they're just grateful to have a location or a venue to take us in and congregate at.
Yeah, I think that's another parallel also, that if there's any sort of Corolla related event, I think everyone's just really grateful to have one, no matter how small it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, a lot of people do travel nothing in comparison to what you guys have, but they do drive a fair distance to come down to events, and I want to make it I want to make it worth their drive. So I want to make sure it's as good as it can be within my control, and just hope that everyone has a good time and gets to meet everyone, hang out, see what new parts people have bought or what they've done to their cars, and yeah, just gets home safe and wants to come to the event next year again, basically.
Yeah. Do you guys have a definition of a purist or like a purist style build for a Corolla over there?
Yeah, it depends. If you talk UK spec or JDM spec, so for JDM car, I'd say it's just using period, like the right parts on it. Like, to me, a purist build would be some good Japanese wheels, like 14 or 15-inch, like some Watanabes, or some really iconic Japanese wheels, keeping it quite subtle. Like I like OEM aero. I can appreciate fiberglass, but I like just Koki bumpers with a Zenki lip, lowered a bit with a little bit of stretch, and just a half a roll cage, that kind of setup, and just a nice, light, nimble car, like a fairly standard paint job, that kind of thing. Nothing too flashy.
Are there any like swaps or build styles that's like not really like the black sheep of the UK?
Sr20 Swaps.
Oh man, okay. That was
So
fast.
I'm an advocate of, I like the 4AG because I think it suits the character of the car. I think it's not meant to be a powerful car. It's meant to have a good balance, and if you go too powerful, you upset that balance, and be it power to weight or just too much weight over the front end. And I just like the look of the 16 valve engine. The cam covers are so iconic. It makes such a unique noise, and that's why, like, you may have seen one of the stickers I actually made was where it's got the 2 cam covers and it says "Save the 16 valve" on it.
Yes.
And I I love 20 valves as well, but for me, a 16 valve engine is where it's at. And a lot of people do swap out the engines as the first thing because they want more power, and then they'll swap out Nissan subframe on the front. Then they may even put a Nissan subframe in the back, and you think, well, you might as well have just kept with a Nissan, like bought an S14 or an S13 and started with that, because it's not a Corolla anymore. As soon as you take the essential components of a Corolla, like the live axle and the engine and little things like that away, you detract from the character of it and what it was originally designed to be.
We're exactly on the same page. It's 2020. I still see people putting S chassis front knuckles on Corollas, and I'm like, what are you guys doing, man?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's ultimately it's their car. They can do what they want, but for me, I like the car as it came and trying to improve upon that by just refining what's there already.
No, I completely agree. So it sounds like 16 valve is really the purest way to do a Corolla out there.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is it's expensive, isn't it? And the gain, it's law of diminishing returns almost. Like the naturally aspirated, you just don't get the power you want for the money you spend in comparison to turbo or engine swaps. But I think if you can quite easily overpower the chassis, and I can see why a lot of people swap in beams engines and stuff like that. But for me, yeah, 16 valves definitely, and that's the way I'm going on my car at the moment. But be it a 7AG rather than a 4AG.
Do you guys have a lot of beams and S2000 swapped cars out there?
Not that many. S2000, a few, but they are expensive engines to buy out here.
Oh, okay.
You're talking a couple of grand for an engine and gearbox, like a running setup. And beam stuff, we only got it's rare because we didn't get the Altezas that much. There's a few of them floating about, but it's not a common swap here.
Interesting that you guys didn't get a lot of Altezas there. And then the parallel is that beams is probably the most cost-effective swap in the US right now. That's why it's so popular in the US. That's why it looks like
I've seen a lot of them coming out of there now.
Mm-hmm. You probably know I'm a big gearbox guy.
Yes, yeah. I've followed your builds on your gearboxes, and it's interesting to see, because I know a lot of the parts for them now are getting more and more rare to find and discontinued. The internals that you need to rebuild the T50, aren't they?
Yeah, almost. Man, because majority of the boxes I build here are that era, right? Like 80s, 90s era. So I have like a S14 box I just finished. All these boxes, these parts have to come from, I have to source all of them from multiple out of country locations just because it's that hard.
I can see the argument for is it J160 swaps and stuff like that coming in now, because it cost wise you're probably not far off the same price for having your T50 fully rebuilt to having a J160 and an adapter kit fitted, surely.
I always try to make that argument, but there's a lot of people out there that have that almost like purist mindset that no, the Japanese people, they're still running T50s in Japan, so it should be doable for me. So
yeah, but T50s are cheap out there. That's the difference.
Okay.
I'd say that the stuff's so readily available out there still. I mean, it just seems like it makes more sense there. But here, I mean, I'm probably going to go towards that, either a RX-8 gearbox or a IS200 gearbox next, because once you've got the adapter kit, the gearbox is, I mean, in comparison, what's a good T50 here now is £400. So what's that? 500, maybe $550. But a Lexus IS200 box, which is similar to an Altezza box but slightly different bell housing, they're £40.
Oh wow, £40.
So they're a tenth of the price for a box that's newer, has a better shift feel, not so worn, and when it busts, you just go pick up another one off eBay for next to nothing. But the adapter kits are quite expensive, so it depends where you want to go, really.
Do you guys have a purist thing with gearboxes? Like what? And then what gearbox swaps are you guys doing out there?
No, not. I'd say it's whatever works. It's really popular here to convert to a Ford gearbox called a Type 9. So with an adapter and a converter, because I think a lot of them are cable clutch originally. A lot of people run them, especially in motorsport, because Quaife and a few other companies make boxes for Type 9 boxes that can adapt to a 4AG. So straight cut, sequential, standard road box, anything like that. So they are one of the more popular ones to go to, but they are a steel housing, so they're quite heavy.
And those should be like an older style gearbox too, right? Like those are
Yeah,
getting old.
yeah, they are. But the thing is, because they're so popular out here, especially with the old Ford Escorts and rallying, and there's still a massive industry behind them. So there's people, spares have been remanufactured for them, and you can literally buy everything off the shelf store for them, brand new. Which is, I can see the appeal for it, but I think a Japanese gearbox is probably the way to go for me. But there are a lot of people running them here at the moment, especially when you can get a straight cut box or a sequential, really, that would bolt straight onto a 4AG.
Yeah, that's really interesting that there's so much support for that gearbox out there because we, I think in the US, we got one really crappy Ford that had the Type 9 box. And so there's basically like no support for that box out here. That's why there's like no,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah,
What did it come in? Was it the XR4 thing,
exactly.
Mercury thing?
Yeah, the Mercure or whatever that piece of
That's
crap
it.
was called.
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically what should have been a Ford's Sapphire with like the turboed engine, but you guys got screwed over a bit on that.
It's okay. Nobody misses that car out here.
No.
um, let's see. Yeah, while I have you on here, if you have any questions
Yes.
for me, yeah, feel free to
Yeah.
ask away.
No, cool. I mean, yeah, it's interesting to see. Like, I've followed the stuff you do online quite a bit, and it's cool to see that someone's really supporting keeping the cars alive out there. It sounds like from the podcast you've got a lot of experience with them, and you a lot of people are they're not very willing to share that knowledge outside, but I think it's good that you've actually managed to build up a business largely on. I'm guessing you do a lot of newer stuff as well, but a large portion of your customer base is for the older chassis.
Yeah, that's correct. So business is still very new to me. I've been an
Mm.
automotive technician for a long time, but actually running a business is very new to me.
Ah,
So
okay.
at the beginning, I was planning to be AE86 chassis only, but I realized how that would not be long
Yeah,
term sustainable. So
yeah. You,
so
you realize how tight Corolla owners are with their money, basically.
I guess yes and no. So there's an interesting dynamic out here where
Yeah.
because these cars are getting to be more of a collector and restoration, there have been
Ah,
a lot
okay.
more owners with, I mean, completely transparent with a lot deeper pockets who
Yeah,
understand that, hey,
yeah,
this
yeah.
is like a future classic or a collector's, and
Oh, that's good.
not many people can work on these things or source parts or know about these
Yeah, yeah,
cars.
yeah. Oh, okay. So how long have you been running it as a business then, from when you moved up from a technician?
So I ran the Autohaus out of my garage with a business license
Yeah,
for
I
a
remember that.
yeah for about a year, and then we've been at the physical shop location for about a year and a half, coming up on a year and a half. So two and a
Mhm.
half years now. I can't believe it.
That's awesome. And the other question I was going to ask is how many Corollas you've owned?
One, two, actually two. I'm sorry, two.
Is that it? Oh, wow. And how many of them do you still own?
One.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I've not seen much of it, but I'm guessing is a US car that you've got, or
Yeah, so that I guess that's the one of our California hurdles is that we can import 35 years or older, but in
okay.
California it's especially difficult because even if you have an import, like let's say R32 Skyline, you still gotta change all the emission stuff to turn it into California legal. Plus,
Ah,
every two
okay.
years, you have to do an emissions inspection on your Skyline.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So
So
it's they don't make it easy.
no, no. So that's why there's the gray area answer is that there's a lot of imports with out of state plates. And I think everyone knows that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard stories about that, which
Yeah,
it makes sense. Like it's until they make it illegal, it's just because it's not legal doesn't mean it's not illegal, I guess is the best way to put it.
exactly. But yeah,
Oh,
my Corolla is a US GTS hatchback. I've had
mm,
it for about like 8 years. Um,
oh, nice.
yeah, it's funny. My other Corolla I got by chance. My, so my tattoo artist ended up having a Corolla, and I remember the discussion with him. I was like, because not a lot of people. You really have to know about the chassis, right, to understand what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, I got one too." And I was like, "No, no, no, man, you don't have one." So until I went to his house, and sure enough, 85 GTS non-sunroof hatchback.
Oh
I was like,
man.
"Oh my god, you really do have one." He was like, "Yeah, I told you, man."
Oh, that's awesome. And is that did you buy that off him in the
I
end or
In the end, I did buy that off him because the it ended up having a rod knock. But like I tell a
oh,
lot
okay.
of my local friends and customers, two Corollas is too many. So
Yeah, I fully sympathize with that. Um I've had the one I've on number 5 and 6 of my Corollas at the moment that I've owned, and the one has been a 3 and a bit year build that it was bought as a rolling shell, and the friend of mine I bought it off, he didn't have it very long. I bought it off him, and he has built the engine for it as well. And we've just found loads as we're going through it, just loads of shortcuts that previous owners have taken with wiring and a few other bits, which it's taken a long time to sort out. But it was on the dyno on Saturday, yeah, on Saturday. So it's finally running now, and I just have to do a few more things to get it road legal. But then I bought another one,
wait, so how many do you currently own?
two.
Two. Okay. Oh my god.
So I've had. I'll give you a brief rundown of the history of them. I think is the easiest way to do it. So I bought my first one years ago, what 10, 12 years ago, and that was a bit of a pile. Loads wrong with it. It just never ran great. A bit of rust. It had some front end damage, and it was a good car to learn on because I before having a Corolla I didn't really know much about maintenance, and I learned a lot on that car. But it was the right time to sell it. I bought after selling that, a friend was selling his car, which was a car built by a little shop in Japan called Garage Chapel.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Yeah.
he imported it with like an N2 kit and all that. He bought it with the like a Larry high comp engine on carbs, and it never ran very well. So he put a stock engine in it, a stock blue top in it, just to be able to get out and do track days. And I bought it like that. Did a couple of track days, drove around for a few years, got itchy feet, sold it to buy a BMW, which was great, but I missed the Corolla, so ended up backing a Corolla after that. I was really lucky with that one. It was just a spur of the moment bid on a car from Japan, a Zenki Panda Trueno coupe, and it looked really standard in the photos. And I put a bid in with an agent thinking I wasn't going to win it. He messaged me the next day saying I'd won, which is pretty exciting. Waited a few months. It turned up and it was a lot better than I thought. It turned out to be a one owner car from new in Japan. So someone had owned it all of its life there. I had all the documentation and paperwork. It was completely standard besides a catback exhaust and some little 13-inch Watanabes. And that was probably the car I should never have sold. But did some mods to that, used it a lot. Didn't even plan on selling it, but someone they basically loved the car, and he kept hounding me saying, look, if you ever sell it, let me know how much you want for it. I spat out a number. He said yes, and it went. And so bought another BMW after that, E46 M3, which was awesome. But I wanted a Corolla again, so sold that. Ended up with another import, was it 11 hatch with a really tuned GZE in it, which went really well. Used that for a while. Decided it was time to move on, so sold that, and then kind of didn't have anything for a little while, and then ended up with the car number 5, which is one I've been building, which is now a black coupe with the Highcom 7AGE motor in it. And while building that, a friend of mine messaged me saying he's been out the country for 7 years. The car sat in his mother's driveway for 7 years. He's back for a few days while he moves to another country. Would I be interested in coming to view it? And I knew the car from years ago, and I'd always liked it. It's a car that came from a company called New Era in Japan. They sourced it it's been on Speed Hunters years ago as a burgundy, like a metallic burgundy 11 hatchback with a 20 valve in it on Longchamps. And it was a lovely car, but time had not been kind to it, and there's quite a lot of rust and stuff that needs doing. But that will be the car that long term, I'm just storing it for the moment, but that's the one I'll probably keep long term and start tidying up eventually. But for now, I just want to enjoy the car I've got and use it as much as possible.
Yeah, I saw in the dyno on your Instagram story, and I was like, wow, that thing sounds great.
It didn't make as much power as I was hoping, but it's not a numbers game. It's got a lot of good mid-range torque, which I'm really happy with. So I'm excited to drive it soon. It sounds good. Hopefully it looks good. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, should get it done, like get the roadworthy test done on it. I need to do a bit of wiring, put the interior back in, and yeah, just then literally just drive it as much as possible. It's unfortunate there's not a lot we can go to at the moment with the current state of affairs in the world, but it means I can at least get out and drive it myself, which I'm quite looking forward to.
Have you noticed a difference in build quality between a UK and a Japanese car?
I'd say, to be honest, I've not been in many of the UK cars, but my understanding is all of them were built in Japan or built in the same place originally. So it's largely just a spec thing, really. To me, they drive the same, they sound the same. I'd say the only downside to both of them is rust, because we have fairly, not necessarily as bad as some places in America, but fairly harsh winters, and they put a lot of salt on the roads in winter. So it's literally signing a Corolla's death warrant if you use them all year round here. They are kind of, I'd say probably March to October we use them, and the rest of the time they sit off the road waiting for next summer, because rust is just, every Corolla here's got rust. If someone's selling a Corolla and they tell you it's rust free, they're either lying or they haven't found it yet. So we're a bit unfortunate in that regard, but it is what it is. There's some very skilled fabricators that can repair it all. So it's just a case of finding, you buy on condition of the shell rather than mechanically at this point in time here.
From what I understand, Japanese cars did not come with undercoating on the bottom. Is that the same for UK cars, or do you?
I think it's probably the same, to be honest. It's before they started galvanizing the cars, the shells as well. So they all rust just as bad as one another. If someone tells you one's better than the other, I genuinely don't believe it, because I've seen both of them in absolute terrible states.
Something that may interest you. So I for sure have had 3 Japanese cars in here, Japanese market cars. And yeah, the more I work on the Japanese cars, the more I feel like there's something about them that's way different than having a US market car. Like, I don't know why. The cars are all faster. The fit and finish is just like so much better on those cars.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's to the point where, like, I mentioned to one of my coworkers, like, I imagine if one of the factory workers came from Japan and looked at a US car and like opened the doors and stuff, he'd be like, "What is this? It's not the same. This is not the same stuff."
There might just be the Japanese mentality when it comes to doing stuff, isn't it? Where nothing but the best when they're new will do. But I'd say secondhand, like, I've seen some of the worst wiring possible come over from cars from Japan. It's everything like using uh, little splice connectors and stuff like that. They're just notorious for it. Where Japanese wiring is just so janky in a lot of the cars that come over.
Okay, yeah, you made a good point because two of those cars were like you could tell it was maybe someone older or someone who really cared about the car, someone who
Mm,
didn't modify it. And then I have one car that was a GT Apex, so top of the line, but
mm.
it became you could tell it was some kid's toge car at one time. And
Yeah, I think that they are the equivalent. Like I don't know what the equivalent in America would be, but to here an E36 BMW was like a cheap drift slash track car, and out in Japan, I think for a large time they were them and S bodies were the equivalent of that, where they were just cheap cars that they could pick up for not a lot of money. If they crash it, they do some basic repairs to get it back on the road, or just buy another one. And a lot of them were subject to that fate. And I think a lot of the ones that go to auction are of that quality, unless you're spending big money at like Carland or some of the other places that are charging maybe 25, 30, 40 grand for a Corolla. You almost expect it to have a bit of you expect it to have some issues.
that's a good point because I've seen some interviews with you're familiar with Running Free, Mr.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Takahashi.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I know so he's told old stories like a lot of his first Corollas were like people just gave them away because they were just like they weren't worth anything, so it was easy to get one for really cheap or for
Mm,
someone to gift
mm.
it to you.
It's not the case anymore, is it?
No,
That's the
no
problem.
way.
Like hindsight is a wonderful thing. Like when you think about the price you pay for some of the parts, like redline centerpieces and stuff like that now, like gold dust, whereas back when you could get them from Toyota, you just thought it was a bit expensive, but it was okay. And now, Christ, people are just naming their prices for a lot of the parts that are hard to find.
Yeah, I completely agree. We have some I know there's so many jokes about prices on parts. Like I'll get cars in here with like Japanese bumpers and red line lights, and I'll be like, "Wow, this
Yeah,
the back end of this car is worth more than a lot of cars themselves."
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like a lot of people now, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of the people are focused on getting the cars restored because they're worth a lot of money now. There's no doubt about that, and I think it's a shame that a lot of people are putting off using them for their intended purpose, that use them as track cars or driving them quite hard because they're worried about the money they put into them. And it's you see a lot more Corollas in the UK, especially, which are now cars that will go to shows, but not as many that will get driven particularly hard or taken to track days or drift days.
Yeah, very very similar parallel out here. And then I'm sure you've heard. I've had a couple guests from Hawaii, and at that
Yeah,
point, it's like they're all. That's unfortunately that's like all the destiny for a lot of Corollas now is to become garage queens or showpieces, which is really unfortunate.
yeah. It's I can understand it to an extent, but I guess it depends where you come from. If a lot of the guys I know have had their cars for a long time, and to them, for example, one of my friends paid years ago, and going back seven, probably 17 years ago, he bought his car for the equivalent of £700, and he races his car in competitive competitive door to door racing, and to him, it was a cheap car at the time, and to him, it's still largely that same car. But when you're going into it, buying a Corolla for 10 or 15 grand, your mentality is a bit different because you spent all that money on it. You don't want to risk damaging it for a lot of people. So I can understand it. To me, it was a car I've always bought to drive. I'm not particularly precious about them. I don't get attached to cars. I use them if they get scratched or whatever. I'm not overly fussed. I'd rather get enjoyment out of it, and my enjoyment is driving it.
Mm,
It may be polishing it and taking it to shows for other people, but that's not really what I'm into.
awesome. So we are just past our 10-minute mark to 1 hour.
Oh,
And
yeah, damn, that's gone quick.
uh yeah, time always flies by on these things. But one last topic I want to talk about with us being both in this content creation space, or even in this space to keep the culture of these cars alive, which I really respect what you're doing, man. Like I was when I got your
Oh, thank you.
yeah, when I got your DM on Instagram, I was like, man, I'm not worthy for this guy to like DM me personally.
Oh, no, I appreciate that, man. It's a hard thing to do, isn't it? Corolla's a it's it the way I see it, the way I think it's almost like preservation through perseverance. That they're hard to keep on the road. It's not an easy car to own, but you do get a certain level of enjoyment out of it. And I just thought if I can somehow give a little bit of a positive contribution to that scene by making a shirt that someone would think is cool to wear, or a sticker that someone would want on their car, or an event someone would want to go to, I'm just trying to do my bit to keep the scene alive. And I think it's really important. There's a lot of separation and politics in everything in car scenes, be it whatever. But I think, you know what, it's just a car. It's like there's so few of them, especially in the UK as it is. You just want to get everyone together, have a good time, like learn from each other. But the one thing I'll say is, like, I'm all for new owners getting a car, but first, nothing grinds my gears more than people posting on a forum or in a group or whatever, asking a question that's been asked a million times.
Oh man.
Google is there for a reason. Do some research first and then ask the question.
Oh
We're here
man.
to help, but you need some level of self motivation to seek your answers before you go. People always take the easy route, don't they?
Oh man. Unfortunately, so true. And that's like the
Yeah. The one thing I've always wanted to do is have like an online glossary of every Corolla like tech tip and issue, and every bolt size for every part of a Corolla, and everything you could think of that you could almost point people to and be like, have it like a wiki kind of thing where everyone kind of, but again, that relies on people contributing, and that doesn't always happen. But it'd be the most awesome thing to just have, if someone asks a question, be like, have you looked there? No? Well, go look there first. If it hasn't answered your question, come back then. That kind of mentality, because I think we have to share the knowledge. There's so few, a lot of people are getting out of the cars now that they've been into them for years, and they've kind of either outgrown it or just all moved on, and that all that knowledge is lost as well. And it's really important, I think, to try and, like, the old Club 4AG forums and stuff like that is such a gold mine of knowledge that kind of just gets lost.
well, it is actually lost right now since the old Club 4AG
Yeah.
forums aren't readily available
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And then the new ones not active. So, but you brought up a good point. There's got to be some way where we can kind of meld the two with the social and then how the forums used to be. There's got to be like a middle point somewhere
Yeah.
in there.
I miss forums a lot, like logging on every day, seeing if anyone's posted an update on their car, and it's all too quick now, where everyone wants to be satisfied instantly and they consume it very quickly and then they forget about it. Whereas I think forums, you kind of have to spend time writing your post, uploading your photos, all of that. I really do miss that, and I think not a lot of people are into it anymore. But I think it'd be awesome to kind of just get that knowledge base centralized somewhere. It's something I've been thinking of for ages, but it might take a little while to put into action. But I think it would really benefit people.
Yeah, I don't know how often you are on the Corolla Facebook groups, but actually someone in the US started another Corolla forum. I think it's
Yes.
886forums.com. Do you know about this?
Oh, yeah, I've just seen that. I've not, truth be told, like I think it's only come on in the last week or two. It's really new, isn't it?
Yeah, very new.
Or am I missing it? I've not, due to work and trying to get the car done, I've not really spent a great deal of time online at the moment. But I did see that, and I thought it was really cool that someone's gone to the effort of trying to like kickstart it again. So I definitely can check it out more in the coming days.
Going back to like my original sentiment about both of us being in this space to keep the culture of these cars alive. where do you see, you can answer these questions in like any sort of way you want. So
Sure.
where do you see the future of the Corolla Brotherhood? Where would you like it to go? And then what are some ways, if you're a content creator, if you're a Corolla owner, what are some ways we can all keep the culture of these cars alive?
Oh man, I'd say I I never set out to. I mean, I didn't, like I said earlier, I didn't start the Corolla Brotherhood. I kind of took it from quite a small thing and built up on it. So I can't take credit for it originally, but since it's been under my not ownership but supervision, I guess all I've wanted to do is just make it a means for getting owners together. And I think if nothing else, I'd love for it to get bigger in that regard. And I've expanded it. Like all the events are open to any classic and retro Toyotas. So we've had loads of cool old Hiluxes, Toyota Crowns, old Supras, like Celicas, everything you can think of turn up, and it's really cool to bring the owners together. And I'd like to, if nothing else, to get more of the other owners in, because they are quite segregated and they stick to themselves. And the idea would be to have an event like a big event at a circuit or something where you'd have enough people to warrant renting a circuit out and actually having something like that. But it's a bit more tricky here with the cost of insurances and liability insurance and stuff like that. So for the moment, I'm pretty happy where it's going, to be honest. We're still quite, like I said, it's a small following in the UK. We do the events and we have as many owners as we can coming out, and everyone kind of knows everyone, which is really awesome. But I'd love to do more stuff overseas as well. I want to go to Australia to meet some of the owners there, go back to Japan. I really want to come out to America to meet some of the guys there on the west and east coast and wherever it may be. So that's kind of where I see it heading. With regards to kind of advice for owners, I'd say it's try and don't keep yourself isolated from everyone else. Try and be active, make the effort. People are all too quick to expect something for nothing. If someone offers you some good advice, as little as maybe just thank them, because I think a lot of it gets lost nowadays, where people are very demanding online. They want an answer to something, they get told the advice, they don't listen, and they'll go and do something else anyway and learn the hard way. There are people that got a lot of knowledge in these cars that have been around for years, and they largely offer that advice for free. Take it and apply it to what you're doing and learn from it, and then kind of disseminate that information down to other owners and try and build a positive community around it. I don't want to sound preachy, but there's only so many cars. They're not making any more of them, and if you want the car to last, you've got to kind of stick together to an extent.
Those are very strong last words that have been echoed through many people on the podcast, is that if we want these cars to last, the community has to stick together.
Exactly, man. And it's been great so far. Like I've met so many good people here in the UK, in Ireland, in Japan, and I look forward to meeting more there and all around the world as and when money and time allows. Really, it's just they're part of my life now. I've had a Corolla in one way or another for like almost a third of my life, and no matter what I do, I can't get away from it. It seems I keep buying them, selling them, I keep coming back to them. So there's nothing like them in my opinion. They're awesome.
Well, Chaydon, I really appreciate you reaching out, and I really appreciate your time. And man, I really respect what you're doing out there.
Well, thank you, dude, and I really appreciate you having me on. It's awesome to have a platform that you've got to kind of reach out to all the owners, and we all do our bit, don't we? And it's awesome to see that there's people that we've never met in person, that I've never spoken to really before today, that really feel the same about the cars as I, and I'm sure thousands of other owners do.
Yeah, completely agree. And if you have anyone in the UK or outside of the country that would like to be on the podcast, yeah, please let me know. I mean, thank you again. You've been the first, I would say, like real out of country guest I've had, and like this is like the stuff we've talked about has been like mind blowing for me.
Oh, awesome! No, I'm glad. And yeah, I'm fortunate enough I spend most weeks I do a call with some of the guys in Australia and some of the UK guys and that. So there's definitely a few people that I think that give you a really interesting viewpoint on the Corollas from a completely different perspective. So yeah, I'll definitely hit you up.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll wrap up the podcast here and then we can talk a little bit
Cool.
afterwards.
Yeah, awesome. No, thank you, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah. But yeah, man, thank you again. And then if we want to learn more about the Corolla Brotherhood, how can we reach out to you guys?
Cool. So mainly, I guess, Facebook, which is the Corolla Brotherhood, and on Instagram, it's Corolla Brotherhood again, or for my own personal Corolla stuff, it's my account, which is Shaycall. So those are probably the two best ways to hit me up. We've got an online store as well that I'm slowly trying to work out, getting a few more things restocked. So have a look there. If there's anything you guys like, drop me a message, or it'd be awesome. I mean, any money that goes from orders goes back into it, so it goes towards new designs or new products and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Chaydon. And then we'll
Cool.
definitely have you on again.
Awesome. I appreciate it, dude. Thank you, Ezekiel.
You got it.